Welcome back, everyone, to Montgomery County, Maryland's Engage at Home, brought to you by the county's Caregiver Support Program. Today, our guest is Esther Ward. Esther and I both serve on the Maryland Commission on Caregiving. And Esther is a family caregiver, and I've asked her here today to share her experience as both an advocate and as a caregiver. Welcome, Esther. Would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Thank you, Lily. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. I always enjoy the time that we spend together. We share so many passions. I am the mother of an adult young lady with Rett syndrome, and that brought me into the world of caregiving, and it opened up really a whole new trajectory to me that I could never have foreseen before. And I'm very grateful to talk to you.
Let's start talking about being a family caregiver. Do you mind sharing just a little bit about your life and your experience?
With pleasure. I was a young mother when my daughter was diagnosed with a disability. At the time, there was no quick check for Rett syndrome, but based on the way that she was presenting clinically, it was clear that we had, a developmental issue on our hands. At the beginning, it was very overwhelming. She is the third child. She is my third child. So at the time that she was diagnosed with a developmental disability, I had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, as well as my daughter, who was at the time a year old. And it was really daunting. I left work. My job became ferrying her from one therapy to another, and of course, taking care of the rest of my family. And it was really, really difficult keeping that balance of making sure that everyone was happy and also that all of her increasing needs were met. And I say increasing because the older she got, the more intricate her needs became. At a year old, her needs were kind of more similar to a typical 1-year-old. But even by the time she was only 18 months old, there was a very big difference between a typical 18-month-old and her. And so as time went on, believe it or not, it became more difficult. When I was struggling with what was going on in my own family, I really thought that I was just the only one in town who had a child with special needs. That changed when my daughter was, I would say, a few months old, or maybe a year old. There was a meeting that was convened by, speaking of advocacy, an amazing advocate in our community. She was the wife of a very prestigious rabbi. Her name was Hannah Weinberg. And she brought in a group of parents who had children with special needs that I had heard about, and through a friend. And I attended that meeting, and I said, and this was in her living room, and it was like standing room only. I said, hold on, this isn't just me. It's not just my family. Look at how many people are being impacted by this. And that really led to the impetus of saying, well, if it isn't just me, then, let's see what we can do with this. And so it started out with support group meetings. Eventually, it branched out to other things. Parents Place of Maryland and the Maryland MSD, the Department of Education in Maryland, provided a training in my community, and they were training parent advocates to advocate for their children in the public school and in the school system. As an outbreak of that, I said, you know what, but it's not just education that these families need help with. It's the day-to-day. It's, if you have a child, if you've got, 3 kids and you have one child who takes up 80% of your time, really, what does that do? And so that was when I was encouraged by them, really, by Marjorie Schulbank of MSDE and by Amy and Kellemer of the Center for Jewish Education. Were very, strong. They said, hey, go for it. And I did. And what started out as being so small eventually grew into an organization that now provides support to over 100 Jewish Orthodox families and it's support in a culturally appropriate way that really hadn't been met before, to over 100 families in Baltimore City and Baltimore County. We now have, as long as COVID stays at bay within the community, we have nightly meetings for the children. It's 2 nights a week, plus depending on what their interests are, it can be more as well, and a Sunday afternoon program. Before COVID, there were groups that they went to on Saturday afternoons during the Sabbath, and those were fully integrated with members of the community. And in addition, of course, there are supports for the families themselves. There's an annual Weekends Away that's sponsored by a grant by a foundation. Again, we'll see what happens this year. I don't know if COVID's going to enable, 300 people to just gather in a dining room. We'll have to see, but there are so many things that, number one, show the parents that they aren't alone, and number two, that give them actual programs that help them and their children so that their lives are just easier and better.
I'm going to ask you more questions later about being a caregiver, but I'd really like you to tell our audience a little bit more about some of the things about organizing on that community level.
Yes, I agree. I'm very fortunate because I live in a community where giving is just a part of life. That being said, I do not have a background in business administration, in nonprofit organization administration. My background is computer programming. So this is definitely something that was, as you said, something that I learned step by step as time went on. What I did was I had a core group around me, initially just of other family caregivers, other mothers, but then it kind of branched out. When we got our first grant that enabled us to become a 501c3 nonprofit, I then needed to become a 501c3 nonprofit. And I had to reach out and find an attorney who would do that for me pro bono. Took a lot of phone calls. And, I think more than knowledge is just stick-to-itiveness. Just stick to it. You know that this is something that needs to be done. Don't stop making those phone calls until you find someone who says yes. We were incorporated in 2008, and that was the year of the Great Recession, if you remember. I can't tell you how many people I called, and not only did they say, no, I'm not going to help you for whatever reason, but they also said to me, you are starting an organization at the wrong time in history. This is, just wait a year or two. And I said, we can't wait a year or two. We needed this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, before my child was born. I'm sure there were other children. This has to happen, and just keep going. I learned a lot from our parents because through the initial support group meetings, I was just thinking, I said, you know what? Looks like we could all use to have somebody in the house at around dinner time and homework time. Sounds like that would really be a good thing. And so from there, I started recruiting volunteers to go into homes during that time. And then, it grew from there. Parents would say, oh my goodness, I'm so overwhelmed. It's right before Passover. And if you're an Orthodox Jew, you practically turn over your whole house. I mean, there's not a corner that doesn't get cleaned. Plus you are turning over your kitchen. New dishes, the special Passover dishes, one set for meat, one set for milk, and it's a whole process. And imagine doing this with not just kids underfoot, but a child with special needs who needs your full-time attention. it can become really daunting. And so we raise money in order to give the mothers help with that task in the form of women who come in and help them clean. And that has been huge. We also have respite programs. And all of the things that the parents can all of these programs really stem by my hearing what and listening to what the other parents needed. Some of them were needs that I had also. And I said, oh, yeah, you know what, I need that too. And some of them were needs that I didn't have. But I said, you know what, there's enough parents out there that this would really be something of benefit. And through that, you know, that's where the programming grew and continues to grow, thankfully.
And that's an example of advocacy, community organizing. And that's why I wanted you on the show today, because many people, whether they're caring for a child, an older adult, oftentimes feel as if it's all up to them and that they're the only one that is living through this experience. And one of the things that your journey has shown is that it is possible to first find kindred spirits in the community and then have those kindred spirits create a fire and have it that it's a community resource. And I like the way that you talk about respite in a bigger picture.
Absolutely. I am a firm believer that 2 hours of respite does not benefit the child and the family for 2 hours. 2 hours of respite can benefit the family for 24 hours. By that, this is what I mean. We have every Tuesday and every Thursday evening for 2 hours. Children with special needs are given transportation to and from a central location where they get to sing songs, they get to learn the Jewish prayers and holidays, and they're given dinner. If it's appropriate, they're given homework help, and at the parents' request, the children can be changed into pajamas as well. So we try to do as much as we can in that 2 hour window so that the child comes home and the parents can just enjoy their child and love him or her, and they don't have to feel like, oh, I still have to do this and I still have to do that. While the child is getting all of these fun things, and they call it, some children call it a party. Oh, we're going to the party again today, because they're just allowed to be fun and happy. And if they want to run around, they can run around. And it's just a wonderful place. At the same time, the parents are able to focus on the children, the typical children that they have in the family. They can do their homework quietly, in a focused way. They can give them dinner without worrying, okay, where's the child with special needs? Who's feeding him or her? And how's it all going? And it's just quiet. It's just calm. So dinner is done. Homework is done. And if they have something else that needs to be done that's more easily accomplished without the child who has special needs, they do that. So what that offers and what that affects is that the parents are calm from the time they wake up in the morning. Instead of saying, oh my goodness, today I have to juggle all of this. No, they wake up at 6:30 in the morning, and there's a knowledge that during that time, instead of it being like Monday and Wednesday, it's going to be like Tuesday and Thursday, where they have that sense of calm. And so they go through that day that way. The evening routine is so different for them. I will say that Mondays and Wednesdays, they can't afford themselves of volunteers, but it's still different. Having the child physically out of the house can be different than having a volunteer. And so those 2 hours afford at least a day of tranquility and peace of mind for the families. And so I think that and caregivers should know this as well, for themselves. You're right. There are family members who feel like, gee, I got to do it all. I very strongly feel that whoever you're caring for, whether it's an adult or a child, is so much better cared for by a caregiver who's happy and relaxed and happy to be with them, as opposed to a caregiver who's just so stressed and so tight and so torn. You're doing not just yourself a favor, but even more so, you're doing the person being cared for a favor by getting somebody else in. Somebody else that, at the beginning they may have to get used to, but it's worth it. It's just worth it for your sake, as well as for that individual's sake. I also think, we're all human, and there comes a point where sometimes families just say, you know what, we need an institutional setting now. And I think that respite, I know that respite is something that will significantly delay that decision. Possibly even make that decision not even something that ever comes up in conversation during the lifetime of that individual's entire existence, if there is enough support given to the caregivers. So I feel very strongly that respite care is something that should be really taken advantage of by family members, not because it's to the caregiver's benefit, but because it is even more so to the individual's benefit.
I'm going to ask you to share another piece of your wisdom. You have had to be a great advocate for yourself and your family, and you've helped other people on their journey to connect with resources, to navigate systems. And I know that you have learned a lot.
I thank you for the opportunity to do that, because I feel like sometimes, understandably, family caregivers are so overwhelmed by the time that they even reach out, or that rather we reach out to a bureaucrat, to a member of the staff of a huge government funding source. We've had it. We're desperate. That's it. We're at the end of our rope. We cannot do this anymore. And help. This is where my tax-paying money is going to. Help me. One thing that I really feel very strongly about is, with my own child, I don't have any control over her disability. I have no control over that. But I do have control over how I conduct myself. So even in the most difficult situations, I really try to think to myself, what's the other person feeling? I'm on the phone with the person who's working for the government, who, may have come in to this business, quote unquote, this job, feeling like I want to make a difference. But is just so overwhelmed, and they have so much to do, and they don't have, enough support to do what they feel like they need to do. So to kind of, not take all of our frustrations out and on the person on the other end of the line, to be a little bit cognizant of, that fact that they're a person too. So having your own network really enables you to have some clout, where you get the information straight, you get the information with clarity, you then pass that on.
Develop that rapport, like what you said. Have it that you're able to keep calm, maybe even create spreadsheets. Have it that you track what you're doing.
Absolutely, 100%. And it even does double duty, because it's hard to keep track of, well, who do I talk to for what? You can't, I don't know, maybe there's someone out there who can actually, solve all of your problems. But most of the time it's like, okay, so for this, I need to talk to the person who handles, who's an employee at the DDA. For this, I have to call the Maryland Department of Health under CFC. So having a spreadsheet, not only helps you track what you're trying to accomplish, but who you have to call to accomplish each goal, because it's likely going to be, if you have 10 goals, you'll probably have to contact at least 11 people. It goes.
We're getting near the end of our time together today. Maybe there's something that you'd like to share with our audience about different ways of approaching this role of being a caregiver.
Thank you, Lily. there are two things that come to mind, and both of them have helped me really in having the life of a caregiver not mean a death knell to happiness and to quote unquote a normal life, even if it is different than, you know, most of my friends. The first is really reach out to people who are in the same situation as you are, even if you have nothing else in common, even if you're separated by 20 years age-wise, if you're separated by geography, if you're separated by background, it doesn't matter. The fact that you're taking care of someone and that is your soul, that is really your primary focus, because let's face it, it really does become our primary focus. Just to be able to network and to feel that you're not alone, number one, and number two, to get that feedback and, oh, you know what, that worked for you? Okay, that could work for me too. There's also a saying that when you share your problems feel like they've been cut in half. So that really goes such a long way. And the second thing that I've learned is, as I mentioned before, some things we can't control. The fact that the condition that our family member has, whether it's Alzheimer's or a disability, we can't change that. But we can keep ourselves under our control. The way that we see things is under our control. Happiness is under our control. I know this sounds a little funny, but I feel that I'm a happier person now as a caregiver with all that entails than I was before. And the reason is, before I was much more, not that I wasn't a happy person, but I was much more reactive. Oh, I won the lottery, great, now I'm happy. Oh, the sun is shining, okay, great, now I'm happy. Now, you know, if I just woke up and said, okay, you know, this is what I got to do today. And oh my goodness, I'm still stuck even before lockdown. I mean, COVID-19, this is nothing new. Lockdown for me is, you know, this was a way of life beforehand too. I couldn't travel. I couldn't go anywhere. I really couldn't go beyond, let's say, a 1 hour perimeter of wherever I was, because what if my caregiver needs my caregiving provider needs something that I have to provide, which could happen based on her needs. But it is within my control to say, you know what, I'm going to be happy today. I'm going to make it a good day, and to do whatever it takes to make that happen. And sometimes it could be as easy as putting on your favorite sweater. I don't care if you're wearing the same sweater every day, you know, if that makes you happy, that's what you put on. It takes the same amount of effort to put on an outfit that you like as it does an outfit that you don't like. And, you know, nowadays everything's washable. So just, you know, whatever it is that just gives you a little lift, make sure that you take advantage of it. And also make sure that you really recognize and grasp onto the silver linings that are there. And, you know, just like it's what you focus on. Your mind is under your control. If you can even make a small list every night before you go to sleep of 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for, it just changes one's perspective so much. And so, you know, again, to know that happiness is within your control.
Esther, this has been such an honor to have you as part of Engage at Home today, and I really wish you and your family well.
As always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. So you have been watching Engage at Home, brought to you by the county's Caregiver Support Program. If you live in Montgomery County or you're looking for resources as a caregiver anywhere, please contact the county's Aging and Disability Resource Unit, 240-777-3000. Our team can help you navigate available supports and resources, whether they are in Montgomery County or further afield. As always, I wish you well and remind you to stay calm.